Nice to see you. Who wants to get ahead in life? People go to amazing lengths to get ahead in life, especially in the 19th century. They would practically cross the world to get ahead. And Ecuador was the place to go. The place that has put more time and effort into getting ahead than anywhere else I know on earth. Has anybody watched the Harry Potter movies? Do you remember the night bus? Do you remember this? Do you know, this character wasn't actually in the books. I'm not sure if J.K. Rowling has ever been to Ecuador, but I would put money on the person who designed this character having been here. Because Ecuador is the place to go if you want to get ahead. Specifically, a small head. A real shrunken head. Okay, I'm not going to lie. This is a little disturbing in the modern world. But for a brief moment, let's leave our cozy comforts in the present, and we're going to venture back in time to a period where modern sensitivities weren't so acutely developed. And may I just point out, before we dive into this, that indigenous traditions and Western collections were probably motivated by different things. Here we go. I want to introduce you to two indigenous groups of Ecuador, the Shua and the Achua peoples. Now, both of these indigenous groups live in the Ecuadorian reaches of the Amazon rainforest, and they're known for their deep connection to nature. They're known for their strong warrior traditions and their rich oral history. Both groups are deeply spiritual. They are very similar. And for most of their history, they hated each other's guts. For whatever reason, these two tribal groups were at each other's throats for centuries, sometimes very literally. Because from about the 16th century until as recent as the 1960s, these two tribal groups would decapitate each other's tribesmen and shrink their heads. Now, I know a lot of you have sold your home and now enjoy cruising year-round, but for those of you still stuck with really annoying neighbors, or perhaps those of you who find the onboard cruise and travel director a nuisance, I want to tell you how this is done. But first, the practice of tzantza, shrinking heads, was not done as a trophy of war. This wasn't some trivial game of war. A head was not displayed on a stake outside villages as a deterrent for potential ransackers. It's more spiritual than that. Oddly, it's quite respectful, actually. According to the Book of Practical Knowledge, there are 6 stages to create a tzantza. First, remove the head. Second, carefully remove the flesh from the skull. At this point, you can discard the skull. According to forensic files, it's common practice to do this under an outbuilding in the yard. The third step is not for the faint-hearted. You boil the skin for about 2 hours in a special herbal broth to shrink it without destroying any of its features. The captain has asked that I make the special herbal recipe available by request only. And he has also asked that I provide a list of names and stateroom numbers of anyone who asks. Once the skin has shrunk in the boiling process, you use hot stones and sand to keep the face's shape intact. And upon achieving the desired shrinkage, It's then important to sew the mouth shut, and we'll go over that in a moment. Finally, you smoke the head over a fire and you decorate it to preserve it. If you're feeling a little repulsed right now, then you're probably not alone. But back in the 19th century, not only was this common practice among the Shua and Achua peoples, but they were highly sought after collector's items among British, American, and European social elites. So let's dig into why these two warring tribes did this. I mentioned before that these two tribes are deeply spiritual. They believe that humans have a soul. The soul drives the body, and the soul resides in the head. So the two tribes were making tzantzas to acquire the souls of their enemy. And the two tribes frequently raided each other's villages and took heads. But they were very specific about it. They didn't take heads from other tribes. They just took them from these two tribes. And they didn't take heads from women. They specifically took the heads of men. Because the Shua and Achua people believed that men had different souls. Souls that were acquired through dreaming. So once a man had acquired the first soul, the arutam, he would be driven to kill. This coming of age inspired men to form war parties, to raid, and to take heads. But a second kind of soul, the muisak, came into existence when a man who had acquired the first soul, the dreamer's soul, was killed. This second kind of soul was thought of as the avenging soul. And so the custom of shrinking the head was part of the rituals both tribes engaged in to curtail the muisak soul's ability to avenge its owner's death. And that's why they would sew the mouth shut, so it couldn't escape. The tribes wanted to harness the power of the soul, but without it backfiring on them. So when a war party returned home with a tzantza, 3 ritual feasts were held. The rituals aimed to control the captured soul and to transfer its powers to the female relatives of the head taker. So the stolen soul would be charged with helping the women in their gardening and animal rearing responsibilities. In this way, the tzantza would help the captor provide more food for his family. It's just like in a game of Japanese chess, shogi. Captured pieces don't leave the game. Instead, they become part of the captor's army. This was spiritual strategy. The final ritual feast was sometimes held as much as a year after the capture of the tzantza, once the pigs and the crops were ready for this fine occasion. And this fine occasion usually involved hundreds of people joining together to celebrate and to eat. And the tzantza, of course in attendance at this ritual feast, would receive instruction on the way of life in the captor's group and all about their territory. According to the oral tradition, it was spoken to as if it were a child being born into the group. And with that, it was thought that the muisak soul, that avenging spirit, would be expelled from the head and the process was complete. The arutam soul, the dreamer's spirit that brought prosperity, good fortunes, health, and fortitude, had successfully transferred to the women of the tribe, and the avenging spirit had been banished. At this point, if the tzantzas were intended as trophies of war, they would have been displayed. But actually, once the ritual had concluded, the Shua and Achua people had no requirements of these shrunken heads. And so came the rather morbid trade of shrunken heads to collectors, usually from Europe or the United States. Now, even though I don't think I've personally acquired the arutam, the pre-qualification to go at headhunting, I can understand the spiritual motivation of the native tribe people to engage in this traditional custom of headhunting for the betterment of your family's fortunes. but I'm still pondering over what possessed a Western collector to pay for some shrunken heads of an enemy Amazonian tribe. Whatever the underlying motivation was, there were plenty of buyers. Actually, too many buyers. And the tribes recognized the opportunity to cash in on their traditions, not only decapitating the men, but also women, children, and animals for trading purposes. The manufacture of shrunken heads for the tourist trade has always been illegal, but it was profitable. Enough said. For anyone born in the 1960s or before, the practice of making ritual tzantzas was still active in your lifetime. It was eventually the combined pressure from missionaries and the threat of army intervention that drew that chapter of tribal rituals to a close. But the tribes themselves still exist, and as far as I'm aware, they still don't get along. Let's look at one more head-related story before we head into our top 10 for your day in Manta. This one's less gory, but also the tale of something that is misunderstood by outsiders. It's Panama hats. You'd think a Panama hat would come from Panama, right? Well, surprise, it's actually 100% Ecuadorian, because Panama hats are actually called the sombrero de paja toquilla, and it has been designed and made in Ecuador since at least the 17th century. So let's discover how these hats are made, and then we'll go over why everybody knows them as Panama hats. Panama hats, if you still want to use that name, are woven entirely by hand using the fibers from the toquilla palm, which is a plant native to Ecuador. And the process is really labor-intensive. It takes great skill. First, the toquilla palm leaves are cut, boiled, and dried, which softens the leaves and makes it possible to weave with them. Next is the most intensive part, time-wise, of the process, and that is actually weaving the hat. Starting from the center, the hat is woven entirely by hand, taking weeks or even months for finer quality versions. And once completely woven, the hat is molded, ironed, and trimmed to achieve its final shape. The best quality hats are woven in Montecristi, not far from Manta. Montecristi is where the Panama hat is thought to have been invented, and to this day has the reputation of exceptionally fine, tight weaves. These hats are such high quality that people say that you could roll one of these hats so tight that you could fit it through a wedding band, and it would still unfurl to a perfect shape afterwards. They are so renowned and so respected that in 2012, UNESCO recognized the toquilla hat weaving tradition as part of its intangible cultural heritage of humanity classification. But why did it ever get the name Panama hat? Well, in some ways, that comes back to the Panama Canal. Back in the 19th century, Ecuadorian hat makers were already producing these lightweight, breathable hats, perfect for shielding the sun in these hot climates. But instead of selling them directly to the world, they exported them to Panama, which was a bustling trade hub at the time. And from there, the hats were shipped worldwide, especially to North America and Europe. Merchants and travelers simply assumed that the hats were from Panama, and so the name stuck. The final nail in the branding coffin came in 1906, when the US President Theodore Roosevelt was photographed wearing one when he was inspecting construction on the Panama Canal. That photo went global, and suddenly the world believed that Roosevelt was sporting a fine Panama hat, even though it had been expertly woven in Ecuador. To this day, Ecuadorians take great pride in their toquilla hats, which are still made using traditional hand-woven techniques. So why don't we dive into our portal and collect our next port of call to find out where you can buy your very own Ecuadorian Panama hat. This is a picture of the pier in Manta. There is a terminal building as well, but we're going to come off onto the pier, get a shuttle bus from the pier side over to the terminal building. The facilities are therefore all in the terminal building, not on the dock side, but you can see it's a really well kitted out port. It's actually really new. And so they're very excited about it, shiny and modern. They've got Wi-Fi. Let's just hope they turn the switch on. They've got toilets. Taxis will be waiting outside if you wanted to take them. There is a little cafe there as well. There's some local souvenir shopping right there at the port area, and tourist information too. Here is a photograph, a map of the port. We are where the ship is, so there are 3 piers. We're going to be at the central one. Then we're going to get the shuttle bus that are going to go take us down to where the T is in the yellow square. That's T for terminal. From the terminal, you can see it is a really short walk to get into town, 550 meters. That's an 8-minute walk. And by the way, and maybe we'll come on to this later at another time, 550 meters. It's because of Ecuador that we have the measurement meter. I'll get into that another time. Okay, let's have a look through our top 10. The Playa and Maquilon. Playa Murcielago is Manta's main beach. It stretches along Ecuador's Pacific coast, so it's really close to the cruise ship port. You can see it sort of reaches up to the cruise ship. It's a popular spot for locals and visitors. It's got a wide, sandy shoreline, steady waves, so it's good for swimming. There's also umbrella and chair rentals here, so you don't have to worry about bringing your own shade. You can pick it up at the beach. Since this is a city beach, you can expect a pretty lively atmosphere, and there are vendors selling fresh coconuts, ceviche on the beach. It's a really nice place to just go on a walk, people watch, especially in the later afternoon, because that's when the locals gather for a seaside stroll. If you're looking for a relaxed beach day, you don't want to go too far, this is the place to go. And next to it is the Malecón Escénico. This is Manta's main waterfront promenade. It runs pretty much along this beach, and it's got restaurants, it's got snack bars, there are shops, obviously great ocean views, and it's pretty busy. Again, it gets busy in the afternoons, because that's when the locals start to come out into the evening, and they come to enjoy the sea breeze, grab a meal, take a leisurely walk. If you're looking for food here, you will find plenty of seafood restaurants serving fresh ceviche, grilled fish. It's the tuna capital of the world. Other coastal specialties, snack bars for something a bit quicker. As I mentioned before, you've got the umbrellas, chair rentals that are right there if you want it. It's also a really popular place for street performers. So if you enjoy watching some artists perform on the street, this is a good place to go. If you enjoy cycling, then there is a cycling path here as well. Exercise stations, you often see people jogging along the beach or riding their bikes. If you like your beaches to stink, then this is your preference. Playa Tarqui. It's a working beach in Manta. Really, it's known more for its bustling fish market than sunbathing. So it's located south of the first beach that we spoke about. This is where local fishermen bring in their daily catch. It creates one of the most authentic and lively spots in the city. It does smell. They are fresh fish. And the fish market is the main attraction here. It generally operates early in the morning. As the boats are arriving in, they bring in fresh tuna, snapper, shrimp, other seafood, and then very quickly the vendors get to work, filleting the fish right there on the beachfront, chopping them up, throwing all the giblet bits away. Buyers, locals, restaurant chefs, haggling for the best catch. It's really great fun. It's very lively. The air is thick with the smell of salt and fish. And if you can just resist the gagging, it's a wonderful experience. Nearby you'll find some small seafood restaurants and cevicherias serving dishes made from this morning's haul. It's so fresh. It comes straight off, chop up, straight to the plate. Great place to see Manta's fishing culture in action. I would recommend going out early. We arrive astonishingly early tomorrow. I think we're coming in at about 5 or 5:30. So if you really wanted to go and be part of the first catch, you could. Otherwise, you could go a little bit later and you'll just see the guts along the sand. The Museo Centro Cultural Manta is a small but well-curated museum that offers a look into Ecuador's pre-Columbian cultures, local history, contemporary art. And it is located near the city's waterfront. Everything's very local here. An easy stop if you're interested in the cultural heritage beyond the beaches and the seafood. One of the museum's highlights is a collection of artifacts from the Manteño civilization, which was a coastal culture that thrived here long before the arrival of the Spanish. You'll see they had plenty of ceramic figures, tools, ancient stone seats. This is before furniture really became a thing. They were the symbols of power among the Manteño leaders. The museum also hosts rotating art exhibitions, so we'll see what's there tomorrow, featuring modern Ecuadorian artists with a bit of a contemporary touch to add to the historic collection. Admission is free. The space is air-conditioned, making it a really comfortable place to explore, especially if it does end up being a hot day. And I will be checking the weather forecast in every Manta around the world, and I will give you the most favorable forecast later this evening. It gives a good break from all the outdoor stuff that is more common here in Manta. Let's go to our next highlight here, built in 1918. This is the Cansebi Museum. I'm not actually sure if that is how it's pronounced. Cansebi. Another small museum, fascinating again dedicated to the culture, history and traditions, but this time of the province. We're in a province called Manabi, and so this province has amazing stories. We're going to get into a couple more of them shortly. The museum focuses on Ecuador's indigenous heritage largely, focusing again on the Manteño, other pre-Columbian civilizations too that thrived along the coast. So coastal heritage. Here, more ceramics, textiles, artifacts showing traditional craftsmanship. Also exhibits on fishing and farming here. So if you're interested in the agriculture or the aquaculture, then this is the place to go. Also, there's things here that look like ivory. It's not. It's called tagua, and that's vegetable ivory. So they've got some beautiful carvings on display here. And one of the unique aspects is its focus on living traditions. It brings the past into the present, and it showcases how local communities continue to preserve their cultural identity. It's right in the city centre. It is free to visit, and it's a really easy and educational stop for when you want to get a bit of time away from the beach. Or you might want to go shopping. The Mall del Pacifico is Manta's largest shopping centre, located right by the waterfront. It's just a short ride from the port. It's modern, it's air-conditioned, good range of shops, international brands, but also Ecuadorian brands. It's where the locals shop, which is always the best place to go shopping, because then you don't pay tourist prices. You've got shopping, there's a food court for dining, or indeed if you just wanted to escape the heat, you could pop inside. There's fashion, electronics, souvenir shops. Also you've got your usual sort of Adidas and Tommy Hilfiger type stuff. Also there is a supermarket in here, so if you need to pick up any essentials, deodorant, it's also the best place to go for Ecuadorian coffee and chocolate, because pay the local prices, go to the supermarket, it's the same stuff, and it's just as lovely. The food court has lots of choice in there, and there are actually ocean views from where it is in certain positions. So you can have a really reasonably priced ocean-fronting lunch. There's a cinema if you want to go and see a movie in Spanish. And there is free Wi-Fi as well. If the port Wi-Fi, for whatever reason, isn't working, then here is a second option. It's fully accessible. There are elevators and ramps. If you're looking for a relaxed shopping experience, this is it. If you're looking for a stressful shopping experience, this is it. The Mercado Central Municipal in Manta. Busy local market. This is where you can experience real everyday life here in the city. Again, located in the heart of Manta, very, very close. This is where the locals really shop for their fresh produce. This is where they get their seafood. It's a great place to see the region's food culture up close. The market itself is divided into sections, so you've got tropical fruits, vegetables, meats, spices, and then you've got stalls offering freshly caught seafood, which is just a must-see in a city that is known for its fishing industry. You will also, in this market, find some small food stalls, and they serve traditional Ecuadorian dishes, like one called encebollando, which is a fish soup, and empanadas as well. So if you're looking for a cheap local bite to eat, no frills, very lively, this is a perfect place. It gets you just that little bit beyond the tourist areas. It is not designed for visitors, but it is a fascinating glimpse into daily life here in Manta. If you are going, expect to be using cash only, and they might not speak very much English. So have "how much is this?" or "I would like this" prepared in Spanish. That will help you get by. All right, number 7 for our top tips is El Espigón. This is in the Parque Centenario, and it is a scenic pier, a really popular gathering spot. People often hang out here. It extends into the Pacific right next to the cruise ship terminal area, and it gives you unobstructed views out over the coastline. Beautiful for a relaxing walk. If you love photography in ports, then I recommend passing by here. You're going to get some great photographs, or simply just relaxing in the breeze. It's especially lively as you get into the afternoon, into the evenings, because when the locals come out at the end of their day, this is where they come to stroll. You'll often see people out with a rod fishing over the edge. Street vendors pop up nearby with snacks and drinks and little souvenir stands. It's a really lovely atmosphere here. You might also see pelicans and frigate birds hovering nearby. The reason is that they're hoping for scraps from the local fishermen, and they tend to get it. So if you love bird watching, a really great place to go as well, to see them swooping in and stealing what they can. It's accessible. It offers benches as well as shaded spots if you just want to sit there. Sometimes I even like to take a book out. I take a little book out, sit on one of these benches, and I just pretend I'm a local. I don't look like a local, but I pretend I'm a local, and I love it. It gets you away from the busier commercial areas, and it's just a quiet moment by the sea. Now we're going to go a bit further away, a 30-minute drive to Montecristi. I mentioned Montecristi before. The Montecristi craft market is set in the town's historic central square, and this is the best place to find an authentic Panama hat, which again, despite its misleading name, is actually from Ecuador. It's not from Panama, and specifically, it's from Montecristi. Montecristi has been at the heart of Panama hat weaving for centuries, with artisans using these hand-woven toquilla palm fibers to create these lightweight, breathable hats that are both stylish and practical for warm weather. These hats, as you know, became famous when Teddy Roosevelt was photographed wearing one. He was there inspecting the Panama Canal, but their popularity dates back even further. The California gold rush prospectors, the canal workers, they were all looking for some protection, and this is what they turned to. A genuine Montecristi hat is known for its fine weave and its flexibility. And they will sell it to you rolled up in a wooden box. So that's the sign of a good, high-quality hat. It comes with a box, and they will roll it up. You can demonstrate that it will pop out and hold its shape. At the market, you're going to find a range of styles. You can find all levels of quality. You've got everyday hats. You can get them for, call it $35. Then you go through to a super fine, perfectly weaved hat, and you'll be paying $1,000, maybe more. So these things get very expensive, but remember, each hat is handmade, and the top quality ones take weeks, even months to complete. There are fewer than 50 master weavers remaining today. So if you really want the real thing, check inside the band, and it should say Montecristi, because nowhere else produces the same world-renowned quality. Sticking in Montecristi for number 9. This is a very succinctly titled cathedral. The Basilica Menor Católica Nuestra Madre de Monteserrate Santuario is one of Montecristi's most significant landmarks. It draws in both pilgrims and also general visitors with its striking white facade. It's got a great hilltop location, so you get wonderful views. Overlooking the town, it's a Catholic sanctuary. It is dedicated to the Virgin of Monserrate, a revered figure in Ecuador, and it is the site of religious devotion, particularly during an annual pilgrimage in November. Inside the basilica's interior is pretty simple. It's elegant. There's an altar honoring the Virgin. Locals come to light candles, offer prayers. The church also offers this gorgeous panoramic view. So it is worth going and then looking outside as well. You see over the countryside, because Montecristi is a mountain town. So you're going up into the mountains. Beyond its religious significance, the basilica stands as a cultural and historical symbol. It reflects Montecristi's deep-rooted traditions. So whether you are visiting for spiritual reasons, simply to admire the architecture, it's another one of these peaceful retreats to get away from the busyness. Final tip for us. We're going to stay out in Montecristi. Number 10. The Centro Civico Ciudad Alfaro is a historically, also a politically significant site in Montecristi, Ecuador, dedicated to Eloy Alfaro, who is one of the country's most influential leaders. Alfaro, who was a revolutionary and a former president of Ecuador from 1895 to 1901, and then he picked it up again from 1906 to 1911, he led the Liberal Revolution. This was the revolution that introduced progressive reforms, including secular education, freedom of the press, and the separation of church and state to the country. He's also credited with modernizing Ecuador, particularly through the construction of the Trans-Andean Railway connecting the coast to the highlands. This museum, the Ciudad Alfaro, serves as a museum, but more, a cultural center, a historical archive, and it preserves Alfaro's legacy. The site has got lots of exhibits, political exhibits, artifacts from the early 20th century, all about the liberal movement if you're interested in the revolution, but it is also the final resting place of Eloy Alfaro, whose remains are enshrined here. The center very frequently hosts educational programs as well, so you may well see cultural events happening, and largely they focus on emphasizing the importance of democracy and social change. It's also a really interesting building. Architecturally, this design contrasts from Montecristi's colonial charm, and in doing so, it creates this symbolic space for reflection on not just Ecuador's past, but also on its future. Admission's free, it is wheelchair accessible, and it is an excellent stop if you are interested in Ecuador's political history and the man specifically who reshaped the nation. Here is a map with all of those highlights posted on it, so that you can see where everything is in relation to each other. Once again, we're at the ship in the middle pier. We're going to take a shuttle bus to the letter T, which is where the terminal building is. From the terminal building, you are very, very close by to 1, which is the beach of Malecon, 3 and 5. They are all within 10 minutes walk. And 6, 4, 7, and 2 are also all within walking distance of less than half an hour. If you want to go to 8, 9, and 10, which are all out in Montecristi, you will need to get some form of transportation. Well, we've talked quite a lot about the heads, but we haven't yet covered the middle. Ecuador, of course, gets its name from its location on the equator. The geographic middle between two poles of our pole-to-pole voyage. Now, you might think that people have always known where the equator is. We take these things for granted these days with our GPS and Google Maps. It's just the middle of the Earth. It's obvious. But pinpointing it with precision, that took some serious science. Enter the French geodesic mission of 1736, a daring expedition that set out to settle a heated debate and in the process put Ecuador on the scientific map. In the early 18th century, European scientists were arguing over the shape of the Earth. One camp, led by Isaac Newton, believed that the planet was slightly flattened at the poles and bulging at the equator. Another, following the ideas of René Descartes, insisted that it was the opposite. It was elongated at the poles and narrower in the middle. So how do you prove which theory is correct? You have to measure the Earth. And to do this, two teams were sent to opposite ends of the planet. One group went to Lapland, near the Arctic Circle, to measure a meridian, and the other, led by French scientist Charles-Marie de la Condamine, traveled to Ecuador, which at the time was part of the Spanish Viceroyalty of Peru. And the idea was simple. Compare the measurements from those two locations. If Newton was right, the measurements nearer the equator would show a wider Earth. The expedition was an adventure even before it started. Just getting to Ecuador was a challenge. The scientists faced disease, shipwrecks, and plenty of political red tape. Once they arrived, they then had to deal with altitude sickness, wild animals, and skeptical locals who didn't exactly welcome a group of foreigners wandering around with strange instruments. Despite these setbacks, La Condamine and his team, including Pierre Bouguer and Louis Gaudin, spent nearly a decade, from 1736 to 1744, measuring distances, angles, elevations. And they used a method called triangulation, placing markers at various high points on the Andes to calculate the curvature of the Earth. And guess what? Their results confirmed Newton's theory. The Earth is indeed slightly flattened at the poles and bulging at the equator. But that's not all they accomplished. La Condamine was the first scientist to conduct a detailed study of rubber, noting how indigenous people used it to make waterproof clothing, to make bouncing balls, long before we had basketballs. He also recorded detailed observations of quinine, the life-saving treatment for malaria. That came from the bark of Ecuador's cinchona tree. They really were ahead in the middle. One of the mission's most lasting legacies was its influence on Ecuador's identity as the middle of the world. Named after the equator that it straddles, Ecuador has a famous monument called the Mitad del Mundo, built to honor La Condamine's 18th century expedition to the equator. But here's the ironic part. Modern GPS measurements show that the real equator is actually about 240 meters away from this monument. This really is a place that was ahead of the curve. They understood how to treat malaria long before Western medicine. They were at the forefront of determining the shape of our planet. And yet it is so easy to misunderstand a place like Ecuador. They chopped off people's heads and shrunk them in herbal baths. They claim a hat that everyone knows comes from Panama. And they told us that the equator is 240 meters away from where it actually is. All of the above is true. But it also comes down to perspective. We might not like the practice of chopping off people's heads and shrinking them. But when we understand that they were basing their actions on their understanding of spirits and souls, who are we to judge? Especially given that it was people from our neck of the woods that were coming out here to buy these shrunken heads as kooky keepsakes once the souls has been extracted. Who's the weird one now? Yes, the Panama hat came from Panama in the same way that this ship came from Florida. But we all know that this ship really comes from Italy. It comes from Florida now because we, the users, came from Florida now. The hats come from Panama because the people who bought the hats bought them from Panama. And we laugh at the irony of the middle of the earth monument being erected in the wrong position. We stand and chortle at our GPS on our phone and smirk at their blatant error. Easy to do when the world's knowledge is at your fingertips. Ecuador is the place where much of that knowledge started to grow little green shoots. When you step foot in Ecuador, you're not stepping on a line on a map. You're standing on the spot where some of the greatest minds of the Enlightenment helped define the shape of our planet. Sometimes the middle really is the best place to get ahead. Thank you.